On the darker corners of the internet, where history bleeds straight into horror, a certain story has taken root. It's a tale from the heart of antebellum Virginia, a story of medicine, madness, and a mystery so profound it was supposedly erased from the history books. This is the case of the Henderson twins. The legend is incredibly compelling, filled with the gothic texture of a forgotten era. It tells of a powerful plantation family, identical twin brothers who fall into a shared madness, a brilliant but dangerous doctor, and a conspiracy of silence from the scientific elite of the 19th century. The story goes that in 1851, something happened that was so baffling and so terrifying, it was systematically scrubbed from every record. But as you start to peel back the layers of this haunting story, a totally different mystery begins to surface. It's a modern mystery, and it makes you ask a crucial question. What if the real cover-up isn't the erasure of two long-dead twins, but the invention of their entire existence? The story of the Henderson twins has spread like wildfire online, presented as a lost chapter of American history. But is it history, or is it one of the most successful and elaborate ghost stories ever designed for the internet? Today, we're investigating the case that science refuses to acknowledge, and we're going to find out why. The reasons, though, are far stranger than the legend would have you believe. The story usually starts in Henrico County, Virginia, in 1850. On a massive 800-acre tobacco plantation overlooking the James River, the Henderson family were local royalty. Their three-story brick mansion with its huge white columns was a symbol of incredible wealth and power, a power built on the backs of 43 enslaved people who were meticulously recorded in ledgers not as humans, but as property. But according to the legend, the family's I didn't just come from tobacco. The patriarch, Jeremiah Henderson, was a man of cold, calculating ambition. He supposedly found a dark and very profitable side business, supplying medical schools with what they desperately needed. He called them anatomical specimens. It allegedly started with selling the bodies of enslaved people who died from disease or injury to places like the Medical College of Virginia. But the legend claims it didn't stop there. Soon, Jeremiah wasn't waiting for natural causes. Slaves who were too old, too rebellious, or just knew too much about the family business would disappear, written off as runaways. Their bodies, the story goes, were sold for dissection and research, a dark enterprise that made them far more money than tobacco ever did. Into this empire of moral rot, the Henderson twins, Thomas and Timothy, were born. The legend often frames their birth as an omen, happening during a violent storm that took out barns and killed livestock. They grew up identical in every single way. Same dark hair, same pale skin, same lean build. But their childhood was anything but normal. They weren't just heirs to a fortune, they were apprentices to their father's grim trade. From a young age, they were supposedly immersed in the family's secret business, completely desensitized to human suffering. The tipping point in the legend happens on a bitter February morning in 1851. As the story goes, Timothy Henderson showed up at the front door of the mansion just as the sun was rising. He was naked, his skin blue from cold. His hands and arms were covered in blood that wasn't his. In his hand he was gripping a shovel crusted with dirt, bone and hair. His eyes were vacant, and he uttered a chilling phrase that became the core of the mystery. "The specimens are walking." This was the moment the legend claims the twins began their shared descent into madness. One twin, Thomas, is said to have spiraled into a violent, uncontrollable psychosis. The other, Timothy, fell into a deep, silent catatonia. The legend of the Henderson twins really ramps up when it moves from the isolated plantation to the halls of a respected medical school. With his sons lost to an incurable madness, Jeremiah Henderson supposedly sought out a brilliant but controversial physician in Richmond, Dr. Cornelius Hartwell of the Medical College of Virginia. Dr. Hartwell is a key figure in this myth, painted as a man who saw the twins not as patients to be healed, but as a perfect, naturally occurring experiment. The legend calls him a surgeon of the mind, a pioneer who believed the human soul could be taken apart and put back together like a machine. For a researcher with ideas that radical, identical twins suffering from mirrored psychological breakdowns were the ultimate prize, he theorized that any differences in their conditions would have to be psychological, not genetic, offering priceless data. According to the story, Thomas and Timothy were admitted to the Medical College of Virginia in May of 1851, and this is where the tale takes its darkest turn. Dr. Hartwell is said to have subjected the twins to a series of forbidden psychological experiments. Fragments of his notes, supposedly written in an unbreakable code, allegedly hint at his methods. The legend talks about ocular strobing, using flickering light to induce altered states of consciousness, and trauma-based conditioning meant to completely shatter their minds. His goal was monstrous: to prove his theories on personality by intentionally manipulating and watching the twins' symmetrical breakdown. The experiment, as the story goes, reached a horrifying end. Within 6 months, both twins were dead. Timothy Henderson allegedly vanished from his locked room one night in October 1851. Dr. Hartwell claimed the catatonic twin had just gotten homesick and wandered off, an explanation that seemed pretty suspicious given Timothy Way. What's even more damning is the total lack of evidence for the story's main villain, Dr. Cornelius Hartwell. A deep dive into the archives and faculty records of the Medical College of Virginia, now the VCU School of Medicine, shows no physician by that name ever worked there. He's a ghost, a fictional character. There was no Dr. Hartwell, no coded notes, and no disappearance. The science in the legend is also completely out of time. The story mentions ocular strobing methods and advanced trauma-based conditioning. These are concepts from 20th and 21st century neuroscience. The idea that a doctor in 1851 would be running controlled experiments on psychosis using techniques that wouldn't be invented for another 100 years is pure fantasy. The story cleverly uses modern scientific buzzwords and backdates them, giving a fake sense of credibility to Hartwell's fictional work. If you search for the Henderson twins, you don't find historical archives. You find YouTube videos, creepypasta forums, and social media posts, almost all created in the last few years. Many use the same title: The Case Science Refuses to Acknowledge. They're an echo chamber, each one citing the others as proof, building a digital myth that looks solid but has no foundation. Even more telling, the story can't keep its own facts straight. In some versions it's Thomas and Timothy. In others, the twins are young girls named Isidora and Imogen. This kind of inconsistency is a classic sign of folklore evolving, not a stable historical account. So, are there any real Henderson twins? A search does bring up a tragic but completely separate real case: Kelly and Kathy Henderson from Kansas. They were twin sisters who bravely shared their horrific story of abuse in 2010. It's possible the creators of the fictional Virginia story borrowed the name Henderson Twins because it already had a faint, unrelated echo of a dark family secret. What we're watching here isn't the rediscovery of a lost historical event, but the birth of a modern myth. The story of the Henderson twins is what's known as a creepypasta, a horror story born on the internet. But that brings up a really interesting question. Why is this story so good? Why does it feel so real? Let me know what you think in the comments. What part of the legend did you find most believable? The Henderson twins story might be fake, but its power is very real. It works because it's a masterclass in modern myth-making, mixing just enough historical truth with classic horror to feel authentic. First, the story is grounded in a real and disturbing history. Antebellum Virginia was a society built on the suffering of enslaved people. And early medical schools in the 19th century did have a desperate and often unethical demand for cadavers. This led to a grim trade in human bodies, sometimes called anatomy murders. By setting the story against this real historical darkness, the creators gave their fiction a foothold in reality. The Henderson family's fictional business feels plausible because it's just an exaggeration of real horrors. Second, the story uses powerful horror tropes that always work. The evil twin, or mirrored twin, is a staple of Gothic horror. The idea of two people who look identical but are psychologically connected in some supernatural way is deeply unsettling. It also taps into the mad scientist trope with Dr. Hartwell, who pushes the boundaries of science and morality. That character plays on our collective fear of science without a conscience. Finally, the story is built like an investigation, which is a super popular format. It's presented as a series of clues: the father's ledgers, the coded notes, the destroyed records, the doctor's disappearance. This structure invites you to become the detective. The very title, "The Case Science Refuses to Acknowledge," positions you as an insider about to learn a forbidden secret. That's an incredibly powerful way to tell a story. This is the new face of the ghost story. In the past, urban legends spread by word of mouth around a campfire. Today, they spread through algorithms on YouTube, TikTok, and Reddit. Stories like Slender Man or the Russian sleep experiment show how fast fiction can take on a life of its own, blurring the line between a story and supposed reality. The Henderson twins of 1851, Virginia, almost certainly never existed. There was no Dr. Hartwell, no secret experiments, and no grand conspiracy by the Medical College of Virginia to erase them. The entire story is a piece of digital folklore, a modern urban legend brilliantly designed to play on our fascination with history's dark secrets. But just because the story is fiction doesn't mean it's worthless. The legend of the Henderson twins is a fascinating case study in itself. It shows just how hungry we are for stories that peer into the past's darkest corners. It proves the power of a well-told lie, especially one that's sprinkled with just enough truth to be believable. And it's a powerful reminder of how modern myths are born, not around a fire, but in the glowing light of our screens, spreading at the speed of a click. Science refuses to acknowledge the case of the Henderson twins, not because it's afraid of the truth, but because there's no case to acknowledge. The real mystery isn't about what happened in Virginia in 1851. It's about what's happening on the internet right now. It's about, we need to create new ghosts for a new age, and to populate the dark corners of our history with monsters of our own making. The twins may be fictional, but our desire to believe in them is very, very real. What other internet mysteries or creepypastas have you stumbled upon that blur the line between fact and fiction? Stories like Candle Cove or the Russian sleep experiment have become legends themselves. Share your favorites in the comments below, and let's talk about what makes these modern myths so powerful. And if you enjoyed this investigation, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history's mysteries, both real and imagined.